So I want to first thank everyone for attending. We are delighted that you're here today. And then second off, want to let you know that we are going to really break down what do you do at the interview. I also want to let you know that the Career Force has other services within our agency. So one of that could be Veterans Employment Services. So if you are a veteran, we want to make sure that you get a hold of us. We also have what's called the Dislocated Worker Program, which I'm not going to get into much detail about that, but if you have lost your job recently due to the pandemic, please get a hold of us. We also have what's called Vocational Rehabilitation Services here at the Career Force. And we're going to talk a little bit today too more about how we have to be a little more creative because of the pandemic and because of COVID. A lot of people are losing their jobs, or their jobs that they have been working at, their location itself has been closed. And we're going to talk more about how do you handle some of this stuff. And just like Rhonda said, this is actually week 5, and it's titled The Job Interview. We want to also encourage you to come next week too, which would be the 17th. And that topic is going to be facing unemployment at 50 or older. So first off, I want to congratulate you. We're going to pretend that you have just gotten the job interview. So in our workshops that we've done in the past, we talked about the resume. If you get the job interview, that means that you have created a successful resume, or you have learned how to fill out an application appropriately. So we always say that if you get the job interview, first we want you just to stop, pat yourself on the back and say, you know what, I did it. I finally got to this point. But one of the things that we want to let you know is that because you have gotten the job interview, that is not where you end. That is where the work actually begins. Okay. So we are going to talk to you today about knowing how to prepare for the interview. We're going to talk to you about the various different types of interviews. A lot of people think that, okay, well, I'm going to go to an interview and it's just going to be me and the interviewer. That simply isn't always true. And especially due to the pandemic again, a lot of interviews are being done virtually. So we're going to touch base a little bit on that. I'm also going to teach you today about how to communicate at the interview, how to give your best image at the interview, what do you actually wear, how do you handle the difficult questions. I'm also going to teach you how to apply what we call the STAR method, so we'll break that down. And then what do you do after the interview is over? So we're going to really get into breaking that down too, as far as do you send a thank you, do you do interview follow-up, what does that actually look like? So the interview actually starts before you leave the house. Okay. So one of the things I want to encourage you to do is that the night before your interview, I always encourage everyone to get in the car and drive by where you're going to be interviewing. So I'll give you an example. Our Career Force moved 1 block down the street. I still to this day have clients who will say, yes, I know where you're located. And yet they'll come to a meeting with me a half hour late and they'll say, well, I thought you were in the old building. So I want you to make sure that you drive by the place where you're going to have the interview the day before. Also make sure that if they have an elevator, if you're going to be interviewing in person, which that's not real common right at the moment, but if you are, make sure that you know that the elevator works. If you have to run 13 flights of steps before you go into the interview, you're going to be wore out before you even get there. Also keep in mind traffic. A lot of times different things can prevent you from getting to the interview on time. And I can tell you right now, I have never had anybody who is late for an interview end up getting another chance. So you need to remember that this is your first and one and only chance to get to that first interview. So you want to be on time. You also want to make sure that you get a good night's sleep, which is difficult to do, especially if you're excited about the job and you really want it. I also want to make sure that you eat something. Please don't go and eat something that you're not used to eating, but eat, kind of more of a bland meal before you go in. I also wanted to let you know that my previous position to working for the state of Minnesota, which I've been here for close to 4 years, but my previous position, I worked for a nonprofit. And my role there was operations manager. So in that role, I did a lot of interviewing. So I found out and learned a lot of the do's and don'ts. When I was in that position, also, they sent me to interview school. So I'm going to be able to give you some ideas on why they ask some of the questions that they do and what they want to hear. So we're kind of really going to break that down today. You also want to remember that when you're interviewing, you only get one chance to make a good impression. Okay. So that's why I want you to make sure that you get a good night's sleep, you've eaten something. Um, Make sure that you verify the address and the location, drive by it the night before. And then the next thing I want you to do is I want you to review the job description, study the company website. I thought it was really interesting when I was interviewing for this nonprofit agency. I actually would have people come in and they would ask me questions like, "What do you do here?" And it's just actually an insult to the interviewer because it's like, really? I'm interviewing you and you don't even know what our company does. So I want you to take a look at what their mission statement is. If you can say to them, you know, one of the reasons I want to work here is because I believe in your mission statement, and then quote their mission statement. I did that myself one time when I was interviewing, and they said, you know, I didn't even know that was our mission statement. So it is very important to take a little bit of time and research the company and review it before you go in for the interview. I also want you to be prepared to discuss your skills, okay? And then also, if you have any gaps in your employment, I want you to be able to discuss that if I ask you about it. And then I also want you to have a plan to improve your skills. So we'll talk more in great depth and detail about that. I'm just kind of giving you an overview right now. It's also important that you check your attitude. As an interviewer and an employer, we are taught and trained to pay attention to your attitude. Now, the thing that I found really fascinating is that when I'm in my role now with the state of Minnesota, a lot of times I will advocate for you with employers. When I'm having a conversation with the employer, I always tend to ask them, what is the most important thing to you in an employee? And every single one of them has said the same or similar type of answer. And their answer was, the most important thing to me was, are you going to fit in? So I don't know if you've ever worked with someone who's difficult to work with or who has a poor attitude. They can actually change the atmosphere of the whole workplace. So what the employers are trying to figure out is, are you going to fit in here? I can teach you the job. I can teach you the skills to do the job. I can't teach you how to be nice. Okay. I can't teach you how to be pleasant, how to come into work with a good attitude. That is your responsibility. So they're trying to figure out, are you going to fit in with the great employees I already have in place, or are you going to come in and upset the apple cart? I also want you to look for ways to show your enthusiasm and your willingness, and we're going to talk more about that, what that actually means, and we're going to call it putting on your game face. You want to look as professional as possible, as the employer may think that you don't care about your personal appearance if you show up and not looking as best as you can. Also want to let you know that you do not want to prepare the day of the interview for what you're going to be wearing. Um, if, you know, I work with a lot of people who they don't have jobs right now, and they don't have a lot of money to go out and buy a lot of nice interview clothes, and I call them that the interview uniform. So please reach out to the different agencies. And again, you can call us here at the Career Force because we know those agencies and who they are. But there are different agencies out there, nonprofits, who will help you with either purchasing or getting an interview uniform. Okay. But don't wait until the day of the uniform to try to get your hands on some clothes to wear to the uniform. We want you to be more prepared than that. So start now before you get the interview, getting something to wear. Another thing that I'm going to talk to you today about is that there are different types of interviews. So like I had mentioned a little while ago, was that we think that an interview is just going to be Mr. Employer and myself and just the two of us. What we're finding out more and more, especially due to the pandemic, that simply isn't the case. You actually could be interviewed through the telephone, and that is just that. It's where you are talking on the telephone. I want to point out that in the event that you are doing a telephone interview, it is very important that you smile during that interview. Uh, Regardless that they can't see you, it's a known fact that we can hear when a person's smiling. Okay. And if you don't believe me, practice that with someone. and say, can you tell if I'm smiling or not right now when I'm talking to you? It really is true. There's also in-person screenings where we're finding that that's getting to be less and less due to the pandemic. We also want to work with you on virtual interviewing. So in the event that you do have an interview coming up and they say to you, it's going to be a virtual interview, and you go, virtual, I have never done anything like that. Please get a hold of us because we can walk you through that. We can teach you about WebEx, Zoom. There's a lot of different platforms that a lot of these employers are using. And even though they're words that some of you have never heard before, doesn't mean that we can't help you with it and that it actually is a lot easier than one would think, okay? There is a behavioral interview, which the behavioral interview is just that. They want to see how you are going to behave in certain situations. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, but I also I skipped the selection interview. The selection interview could be multiple interviews. So I've talked with people who they say, Gloria, I had to go in and interview 3 different times with 3 different groups of different types of people. A lot of that could be because, again, they're trying to make the best selection. But when they're doing that, a lot of times there's different people in the chain of command on where you're going to be working. So the employer likes to get everybody's input on who they think would be the best fit. And again, this all boils down to who is going to fit in to the existing company and the great employees that are already in place. When you're doing the selection interview too, you want to make sure that you're evaluating your skills, because that's what they're going to be doing, is evaluating your skills and your ability to fit into the organization. Everybody will be doing kind of a feedback session after the interview. And basically what they're going to be doing is talking about, well, what did you think about this person? Okay. Behavioral interview is to provide more information about your on-the-job behavior. So it could be in regards to your personality, to your character, could be questions that would require you to describe how you would handle work-related situations. And then we're also going to talk about the STAR technique. That is an acronym that we're going to break down. You're going to know exactly what it means in a little bit here. But it can help you to prepare for the interview. Another interview that is very common now is the group or the peer group interview. Now that could be where you go in and you have the opportunity to meet and talk with coworkers. It's a part of determining if you are going to fit in. In addition to that, it could be 10 people that are actually interviewing you, or it could be 5 people. But it's going to be typically more than one person interviewing you. And what I have been on a group interview in the past, and what happened was each one of the members would ask me a question and we went around the table. Now, in that case, it's very difficult, especially if you're nervous and you want the job, it's difficult to remember everyone's name. So one of the ways that I want to recommend that you do that is that you ask for everyone's business card. That's one way. Another thing that I want to point out to you is that if they introduce themselves to you as, hi, my name is Miss Mitchell, then in the thank you card, you're going to refer to them as Miss Mitchell. If I introduce myself to you as Glory, then you can refer to me in the thank you card as Glory. Now, again, these are kind of small details, but part of the reason that they're doing this group or peer group interview is that they're checking to see if you are paying attention to the details. And those details do matter, okay? Communicate your best image. So get everything organized early. Have copies of everything you need and have your portfolio ready to go. Now, I need to tell you that the first time I heard the word portfolio, I thought, what in the world is that? Okay, portfolio is actually just a fancy word for a folder. But in that folder or your portfolio, you want to have, I always say, at least 5 copies of your resume. Now you're like, 5 copies? Why in the world would I need that many copies? I've already sent it to them. The reason that you need that is, and I really had this happen to me one time, I was waiting to be interviewed, and the interviewer came out and said, Glory, I'm sorry, but we're not going to be able to interview you today because our computer system went down and nobody made a copy of your resume. So we aren't going to have your resume to look at during the interview. And I said to them, well, you know what? I just so happen to have some copies of my resume in my portfolio here. So I was able to be interviewed regardless that their system went down. And I ended up getting hired because I presented myself as being organized and ready to go. Another thing you want to have in that portfolio is any copies of any of your certificates. Okay, so if you have certificates that apply specifically to the job, you want to make sure you have a copy of that. Now, one thing I want to let you know that when you are at the interview and you say, oh, and by the way, here is my welding certificate, for instance. If they don't look at it, don't be offended by that. But what I want you to do is I just want you to leave it on the table. Because guaranteed after the interview, once you walk out, they're going to pick up all the paperwork that they have gotten and acquired from you, and they will take a look at that certificate at a later time, okay? When you are going to the interview also, I want you to plan to arrive 10 to 15 minutes early, okay? Please don't arrive a half hour early. That's creepy, okay? That's a little bit too long. But I want you to be there 10 to 15 minutes early. Before you go, I want you also to go to the bathroom and take a look at yourself, okay? I interviewed a gentleman one time who he had something green on his tooth, and I didn't know him well enough to say, excuse me, sir, you have something green on your tooth, but it distracted me during the whole interview. So you want to go look in the mirror, make sure that everything is where it needs to be. Take a deep breath. And kind of prepare yourself in your mind. Say, I can do this. I am talented. I am skillful, and go forward. Okay. One other thing that I want to make sure that you have in mind is when you get to the interview, you tend to typically have like a receptionist, or I call it the first point of contact. So that person is not necessarily going to be the person who's going to be interviewing you, but that person is going to be sitting there while you're sitting waiting for the interviewer to come and get you. Now, when I would interview someone, and this is a real true story, I was interviewing a gentleman, and as far as I was concerned, I was going to hire him. He interviewed very well, fit right into the organization, was exactly what we were looking for. But I never made the decision to hire someone on the spot until I talked to Miss Jackie. No, Miss Jackie was the point of contact. She had been with the organization for over 15 years. I held her near and dear to my heart and respected her opinion greatly. So after I would interview someone, I would always go to Miss Jackie and say, what did you think? Because she was actually sitting in her office having that person who was waiting for me to interview them, and that person would be spending a few moments with Miss Jackie, up to 15 minutes, okay? So she would get a real good idea of how they were in addition to my interview. So after I got done interviewing this gentleman, I turned to Miss Jackie and I said, well, what did you think? And she had this look of horror on her face. And she's like, you're going to hire him, aren't you? I said, not necessarily. I want to find out what you think. She said, well, first off, what happened was he came in here and with his cell phone. Now, that's the first thing I want to let you know is that you keep your cell phone in the car. Don't even turn it on vibrate. I don't know if you're aware of how loud vibrate is during the interview, but it feels like an earthquake, okay? Second off, what ended up happening was he answered his phone, okay? Again, very inappropriate. And what he did was he swore, whoever was on the other line, he swore and said, I told you I'm at an interview. I'll call you when I'm done, and hung up on her, okay? Now, the deal is that if you're going to talk to a loved one like that, what are you going to say if you're not happy with what's going on at the job? Did I hire that person? No. And it was based on the information that I got from Miss Jackie. Even though, remember, back up, I told you he interviewed really well. So please be aware of some of those things. The interview starts the moment that you leave your house, and it doesn't end until you're actually signing the paperwork, okay? Rhonda, I'm going to stop here for a moment and see if we have any questions.
Yes, we certainly do, Glory. Thank you. So the
Yes.
first question that came through is, during the interview, when do we disclose the disabilities, if we have disabilities, and explain what we can't do, what we can and can't do? When do you bring that up?
I guess I would actually, it wouldn't bring it up at all unless you're asked about the disabilities. No, they can't really get into detail about that. Um, I guess I would need more information on that question. And that probably would be a question where it'd be better off if you get a hold of us after this interview and we can talk more one-on-one is what I mean. Um, some disabilities do not ever need to be brought up. And then unless you need accommodations, then of course you would bring them up if you're asked about them. But I would only bring them up when you're asked about them. And also you can get into more detail after you've been hired.
And I'm not sure that they, yeah, can ask questions about that if you're in the, protected classes. So you'd really want to guard that information, I think.
Yes, I agree.
Okay, so here's another question. So how do you explain employment gaps when the ER, which I don't know what that means, was harassing and the suit favored me?
Boy, that one I need some more detail on too. So I'm going to talk to you more about how do you explain the gap in employment. We'll get into more depth about that. If you could put in the chat, even if you just want to put it directly to Rhonda about what the word ER means, I'm not 100% sure what that means.
Okay.
One of the things I do want to point out to you too is that let's say you had a bad experience at your last job. Under no circumstances do you ever cut down your previous employers, even if they were horrible. Okay. And the reason for that is that every employer that I've ever talked to, their reputation is everything. Okay. If you go in and you say negative things about your previous employer, that interviewer is going to be thinking, my goodness, what are you going to say about us if you don't work out here? Okay. So even though things might not have went the way you wanted it to, it's still important that you keep it positive. Okay. Did you get any more clarification on that, Rhonda?
I have not yet. Well, that.
Okay.
So here's another question. So after the telephone interview and sent a thank you note, how long should I wait to call or write again to see if they've found someone or that? Where are they in the process? How long do you wait?
Okay, typically what we say is 3 to 5 days, and those are business days, unless you're applying for a company that's open 7 days a week. So typically you can check back with them in 3 to 5 days. Now, you want to be kind of careful about how you're checking back with them. So at the end of the interview, you want to say, first off, when are you looking to fill the position? And again, we'll cover this as we get closer towards the end of the interview in this workshop. So you want to ask them, when are you looking to fill the position? And could I call you back in a few days? And when would be a good time for me to get a hold of you just to check to see if you've made a decision? Okay, then you'll have clarification before the interview is over.
All right, so circling back to that previous question. So how do you explain employment gaps when the employer is what ER was, when the employer was harassing and the suit favored me?
I don't think I would get into that at all. When you're talking about your employment gaps, a lot of times you can use different terms. So I have worked with clients in the past where the reason that they had employment gaps was because they were doing more career exploration. Okay. Sometimes the reason they had employment gaps was due to it could be a family situation. So what I mean by that is that you took care of a loved one and you couldn't work at the time because you needed to take care of a loved one. Now that loved one is better, so you can go back to work. Again, I think it's really important for you to get a hold of us at the Career Force so we can work with you one-on-one in regards to the employment gaps. Another way that we can help you with employment gaps is instead of putting the day, month, and year you started and the day, month, and year that you quit, depending on the job, some of those jobs you can just put years in. So that will help you cinch up the employment gap. And again, a lot of this is going to be really, really important on just role playing it out. So by you talking to us and us being able to find out the reason why you have an employment gap, we can give you a better idea of what would be appropriate to say. But to say I worked for a company that they faulted me, I took them and won unemployment and they were at fault, you don't want to say anything like that, even though that may be the truth. Okay.
Thank you. So here's another question. So I grew up in a small town atmosphere, and it was told to me to always accept that offer, accept any offer. How can I get it in my head that there are bad companies or bad departments within a company so that I can make wise choices?
Wow, that's a great question. You know, I would love to tell you that every day of every job is just butterflies and angels' wings, but that simply isn't true. So, every person who works a job there's certain aspects of their job they're probably not that crazy about. Okay. What really matters there is that it's important that you realize your value. Okay. People will treat you the way you allow them to. So once you realize your value, that you are valuable to the employer, um, that is going to also determine how other people treat you. So if you are in a situation where people aren't exactly jumping up and saying, "Yay, Norm's here," like Norm used to walk into Cheers. Um, I would actually stop and take a look at how your attitude is. So a lot of times we end up thinking the things that you're not. So let me give you an example. When I would be interviewing, one of the very first questions I would say is, tell me about yourself. Okay. And again, we're going to get into this, but I found it really fascinating when that question would come up because oftentimes people would say, well, I can't do this, I can't do that, I can't do this, and I can't do that. Okay. Instead of being able to tell me what they can do. So it's important that you start to believe what you can do, and then you can make better decisions too. And in addition to that, sometimes when you're working in a department that is not going very well, I want to encourage you to make sure you have a good attitude and hang in there because I'm a strong believer in karma. And what tends to happen is either you'll get a transfer or the person that you're having struggles with, they'll get a transfer or they'll quit. But hang in there because things can change. You need to realize too that you can't make a change if you quit. Okay.
And also, speaking to that, working with your network and asking them, folks that you know that work there, and say, what's the culture like? What's the feel like there? So that you get an idea of what it might be like in that company, in that department.
Yes, excellent.
So circling back to the disability question, apparently they ask about the disability when you fill out the application. And personally, I'm not sure that that's legal. That's
Yeah,
asking if you have a felony record. I'm not sure that that is a legal question. So I'd be curious to hear more about that.
I agree completely, Rhonda. I think this person who's asking these questions, I think you need to get a hold of us afterwards. Rhonda, would you mind putting our phone number in there in the chat,
Sure.
just to make sure they have it?
Yep. Yep. And I've made a connection with this person, so we'll circle back to that.
Excellent.
Here's
Excellent.
another person that wants a one-to-one meeting, which is great. We love to do that. So we'll post our phone number. You can give us a phone call. Oh boy, this is a tough one, and this is going to come up next week in the job in the webinar. How do I handle questions about my age?
Excellent question. First off, questions about your age are illegal. Okay, they're not allowed to ask you how old you are. Now, here is what happens. Typically, and we're going to get into this. So typically the very first question they'll ask you is, they'll thank you for coming in and they'll say straight up to you, tell me a little bit about yourself. Okay. And here's the type of answer you'll say. Well, I was born in so and I'm this old and I have this many children and I've been married for this long. Well, no, I want to challenge you a little bit. What does that have to do with the job? Okay. And in addition to that, I was taught as an interviewer to ask you that question. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Then I was taught to put zippers on my lips and let you go ahead and talk. Okay. It's illegal for me to ask you how old you are, but you tell me. It's illegal for me to ask you your religious preference, but you tell me. It's illegal for me to ask you about your sexual preference, but you tell me. It's illegal for me to ask you how many children you have, but you tell me. Okay. And again, I am taught just to go ahead and be quiet, because the more you tell me, the better decision I can make, correct? Okay, so they are not allowed to discriminate by age, and yet it happens all the time. You just, they don't come to you and say, oh, by the way, I'm not going to hire you because I think you're either too old or too young. They just say stuff to you like, I think you're overqualified or underqualified. So what we want to do is we want to coach you more on what a valuable asset you are because of your age without bringing up that actual number, okay? Another thing that's super important is, let's say you got 33 years of experience. I know that you worked super hard to get that wisdom and that experience, but on your resume, you only want to put the words 10 plus, okay? Because think about this for a moment. If you tell me you have a 33 years of experience in something, how old can I just assume you are? I'm figuring you started probably around 20 years old, so 33 plus 20. Okay, you see what I'm saying? So you want to only go 10 years back, even though you have 33 years of experience. You want to put on your resume 10 plus years. Then you'll get the interview. Clearly, when I walk into an interview, they're going to realize that I'm not 20 years old. But now I'm going to be able to tell the company, the interviewer, what an asset I'm going to be because I know my skills, and in addition, how much money I'm going to make them. Okay. I think it's really fascinating how a lot of times when we go in an interview, we go in with the intent that what you going to do for me. Okay. What are you going to pay me? What are the benefits? You don't discuss any of that at the interview. Okay. That's inappropriate. I'm going to teach you how you find out what their pay range is, and then you can determine whether you even want to apply for the job. But what you're doing is you're going in and you're convincing the employer, even if it's a nonprofit, you're going to say, you know what, I believe that I can make you a lot of money. And in turn, I'll make some money too. Okay. So that's a whole different mindset than what are you going to do for me?
Can I add to that? So getting back to the
Yes.
disability question, when it comes up in the interview, are you able to stand for 6 or more hours? And if you're not able to, how do you answer that question?
Okay, so my next question would be is why would you want to work for something, a company like that where they're requiring you to do something that you don't want to do or that you can't do? Okay. Now, there's accommodations also, but part of the reason that they have some of the job requirements are just that it's required to do that. So again, I think we need to have more of a conversation one-on-one with you, because it sounds to me like you've got a lot of skills, but you're not 100% sure where to go with your next job adventure.
Yeah.
Okay.
So here's another question. So what if you have similar skills to what they're looking for, but you've used different software and different computer programs than those that are required, and so you're facing a bit of a learning curve? How do you deal with this in the interview? If you believe you are otherwise fully qualified, are there questions about on-the-job training, or how could we help?
Excellent, excellent question. So for starters, those are called transferable skills. So you might have used, like you said, a different software system than what the new company that you're interviewing for is requesting. Another thing I want to teach you about is Coursera. So we offer actual college classes that are free right now through careerforceminnesota.com. Okay. Rhonda, would you mind putting that link Career Force into the chat as well? You probably already have, but would you do it again? So
Sure.
you can go on our careerforceminnesota.com website and find out about Coursera. So the skills that you're talking about could actually transfer into this company actually very easily, even though you've not used that specific software. And you can go on Coursera and take a couple refresher courses to help you, so you can tell them at the interview that, you know, although I have not used ISIS, for instance, that's one of the programs that I used to use in the past. Although I haven't used ISIS for a long time, or I'm not real familiar with it, I am familiar with Quicken, which is similar to ISIS. Okay, so I'm just using that as examples. But what you want to do is you want to show the employer that you can transfer the skills you've already learned and have mastered very easily into what Mr. Employer is looking for. Okay. I think, Rhonda, oh, did you
I
have
want to
one more?
continue on. I want to continue on. We do have more questions, but if you want to continue on, we can take a look at these when you're done.
Excellent. Yes. So we'll do a few more slides here and then we'll come back to you. Okay. So
Okay.
handling the tough questions, you want to make sure that you're giving direct and honest answers. Now, it's tough to do that, to give direct and honest answers when you're wondering what in the world does the employer want to hear. So again, one of the services that we offer at the Career Force here are mock interviews, and we can talk with you just even over the phone about different companies. And the reason that we know what they want to hear is because we've asked them. What do you want to hear when you ask this question? Okay. Be prepared, anticipate the questions and practice them beforehand. We use the sandwich method, which means you're going to talk about something positive. If you do have something negative that they've asked you, like for instance, one of the questions they could ask you is that, tell me about a time when you worked with a coworker who was difficult to work with and how did you handle it? Okay. That happens on the job a lot when you're working with someone who's difficult. How did you handle it? Okay. What you want to do is you want to say a positive statement followed by a negative situation, ending with a positive statement. So that's why we call it sandwich. I love this analogy because it gives you a good visual too that, okay, so they just asked me, what would I do if I'm dealing with a difficult coworker? What would you answer to that? So the appropriate answer would be, if I am dealing with a difficult coworker, the first thing that I do is I go to the coworker and I say, you know, kind of get this impression that you're having troubles with me. Did I do something to offend you, or is there something that I could do to make this better? Okay. And if they say, heck no, I don't like you, get away from me. Okay, then your next step would be to go and get your supervisor involved. But you want to keep it where you say, when I dealt with a negative coworker, I first went to that person and tried to work it out, and it ended up working out. Or you could say the person just still had issue with me, so I got the supervisor involved, and we were able to make the situation improve. And in addition to that, the coworker and I never had issue from that point on. We learned to trust each other. Okay, so you just want, again, to take the positive, negative, and the positive and sandwich them together. Don't leave it on the negative, okay? Focus on your best skills and the skills that the employers are looking for. Some of the more difficult questions could be, tell me about your worst boss, okay? Tell me about a time when you failed. That's difficult to talk about. I'll give you an example of a really good answer when they ask you, tell me about a time when you failed. I've worked with a lot of clients in the past who they did not graduate high school, but instead got their GED. Okay. I'm like, well, what do I do in this situation if they ask me something about, tell me about a time when you failed? And I would say, okay, so first off, I want to know, why did you not graduate from high school? And they'll say stuff to me, and this is just a typical answer. Well, I guess I thought that I could make more money and I wanted to go to work right away and I wanted to make some money, so I decided I didn't need school. Okay. Then I found out later on that that probably wasn't a very great idea and that I did need school, so I went back and got my GED. There's your answer right there. Okay. That could be a time when you didn't make a great choice, but you still turned it around for a better choice. Okay. So sometimes when they say, tell me about a time when you failed, it does not mean that you fell down and stayed down. It means, how did you fall down and what did you do to get back up? Okay. The next thing that I want to point out to you is, and I love this analogy because it's an acronym that stands for STAR, but it helps you when you're at the interview and when you're getting nervous, you can think about the STAR acronym. So it stands for situation, task, action, and result. So what was the situation? Provide an example of a situation that you were involved in that had a positive outcome. Okay. Describe the different tasks that involve that situation and choose the tasks that show your skills. Explain the actions you took in the situation and describe the positive results that came from your actions. So let me give you an example, okay? Let's say that they asked me this question and my example would be, we ended up having to do a group project, okay? And so when we were doing the group project, Our task was to improve sales and get 5 more sales people trained up in order to reach our goal. So the first action that we took was to determine which 5 people we wanted on our sales team. We picked them. Then what we did was we trained them to sell the product, trained them all about the details of the product. They knew the product inside and out. And as a result, our sales team as a group ended up improving our sales by 30%. Okay, so do you see how you took the situation, you had the task, what did you do, what was your action, and what was the end result? Now, these questions are the most common questions that are asked. Okay, I also want to encourage you to Google the 10 most common questions. You'll see these questions in there, and then there's also a few more. But remember how we talked a little bit about tell me about yourself? Please keep it job orientated. Okay. When I ask you, when I'm interviewing you, tell me about yourself, I want you to talk about how you're going to fit into the job here. So I want you to say stuff to me like, well, you know what? I absolutely love computer programming. I am so delighted to be here and that I get to interview for this company. I have been in computer programming for the past 5 years, and I've learned that I'm really good at it. Stop talking. Okay. Sometimes when I interviewed people, they would get nervous and they keep on talking and talk and talk and talk. And they'd actually answer all the questions before I had even gotten to them. Want to let you know that a typical interview lasts around 15 minutes. If you're there for a half hour, you got a really good chance of getting the job. But now take it to the extreme. I interviewed a gentleman one time, which it was 2 hours and 15 minutes, and I had to actually do suicide protocol with him because I was concerned he was suicidal. So that's the extreme on the other way, okay? But you want to be able to give a short, detailed answer and then give yourself permission just to stop and let them ask the next question. Why are you interested in working for this company? Please, please research the company. I had a gentleman one time say to me, what do you do here? Okay. What is your major weakness? This is where you use the sandwich effect also. Okay. Let me give you an example. If someone were to ask me, what is my major weakness? And this is really true about me. One of my major weaknesses is Excel. Okay. It's not my favorite program. Now I work with quite a few colleagues who they absolutely love Excel and are excellent at it. But I would say my major weakness is Excel, but Mr. Employer, what I'm willing to do is to take a refresher course before my first day of employment. Now you can do that on Coursera as a side note, okay? But do you see what I just did? I talked about one of my major weaknesses, but I turned it back into a positive. Now, I'll give you another example. Please don't say stuff like my major weakness is showing up for work on time, okay? My major weakness is I don't get along with people. Okay. Instead, what I want you to say is come think of a weakness, something that you can turn back into a positive. Okay. I had a person tell me, which I thought this is a great answer. One of my major weaknesses is perfection. I want everything to be perfect. But I've realized that through life, there's no such thing as perfect. So I do the job to the best of my ability. Okay. What are one of your strengths? Again, I want you to be able to tell me what your strengths are instead of tell me what you are weak at or tell me what you're not. Okay. I want you to be able to say, my strengths are I am dependable, punctual, I'm a woman of my word. I do the job to the best of my ability. Okay. Now, here's the truth. We don't sit around and talk that way normally. Okay. If I walked up to you and said, hi, my name is Glory, and by the way, I'm all these things, it'd be easy for you to say, yeah, and you're kind of a Fruit Loop too. Okay. Because we don't normally talk that way. But the truth is that when you're at the interview, that's the time when you have permission to go ahead and talk about your strengths, talk about how you're going to be the best person for the job. Before you go into the interview, I want you to look in the mirror and say, I am the best person for this job, because that's going to come across to me when I'm interviewing you. You need to remember that the reason I'm interviewing you is because I need your help. Okay. So just convince me that you're the best person for the job, and I'll give you a chance because I need your help. A lot of times when I would interview, I'm like, yes, I can't wait to interview this person because I know they're going to be a great fit. And instead they tell me why they weren't going to be a great fit. Okay. So make sure that your mind is in the right set of getting the job. Okay. The last one is, where do you see yourself in 3 years? I had someone that I interviewed and they said to me, I see myself owning my own business. Well, now, why would I want to put all this time and effort and large amounts of money into training you if you're going to go out and buy your own business and go down the street and compete with me in 3 years? Not going to happen. Okay. So the truth of the matter is do any of us know where we're going to be in the next 3 years? No. Okay. Especially with the pandemic and all the stuff that's going on. But when you're interviewing, the appropriate answer is, I'm going to be working here. Where do I see myself in the next 3 years? I'm going to be working here and hopefully I will have gotten a promotion. Okay. Make sure that you give the employer the impression that you are going to be with them forever, even though we all start a job not knowing for sure how it's going to work out. Okay. Rhonda, I want to give you a chance to ask a few more questions.
There you go. Technical difficulties. So we do have a
Yeah.
couple more questions going back to illegal questions. So how do I not answer an illegal question and still get the job? I don't want to
Well,
answer that question, but I want the job. What do I do?
yes. Well, they're not supposed to ask you the question. So let's say, okay, let me think of a legal question. So first off, how old are you? That would be an example. If someone asked me, say, Glory, by the way, I was wondering how old you are. I would say, what does that have to do with the job? Fair
You
enough.
know,
Okay.
yep. And there's questions like, do you own a vehicle? Well, I have reliable transportation.
Excellent point, Rhonda. I'm so glad you brought that up. Do you know that if your mom's giving you a ride back and forth to work every day, that's considered reliable transportation? Okay. So again, a lot of this is your perception where we've perfected some of the answers that the employer wants to hear. You don't need to say, well, my mom gives me a ride. Okay? Nobody needs to know how you're getting there. They just need to know that you're going to be there.
So there are a few more questions on age, that the online applications force you to enter the date you graduated. Is that legal? I mentioned my graduation dates on my resume. I look like a senior citizen, those sorts of things. How can you tell them I'm going to be with you for the next 10 years if you're a senior citizen? So
That you
lots of
have,
those questions, I'm sorry, will be addressed next week in this
yes,
session. And if you can't attend that session, it is recorded on careerforceMN.com, and I will put that link in the chat box. But I would encourage you with these kinds of questions to sign up for next week's session.
that's excellent, Rhonda. We think alike. I was going to say the same thing. Another thing too, that you want to have somebody review your resume. And if you have an application that's asking you when you graduated, I want you to stop and get a hold of us. Stop filling out that application and get a hold of us so that we can talk a little more about that. I went to college older. It wasn't right after I graduated high school. So I don't put on my resume the year I graduated my college degree. And there's a lot of things that I keep off of there. So we're going to teach you how to actually do some of those things and how to overcome some of those questions also. Some of those questions too, that they're not supposed to be asking you that. So I'd love to have more time to really break this down, but like Rhonda said, at our job search over 50, I want you to try your best to come to that. And then if nothing else, give us a call and we can talk more to you about it one-on-one.
Perfect. Yeah, those dates are tough.
They are.
Here's one, and this is a longish question. It says, I keep getting responses. I heard on a recruiter video, give the interviewer the benefit of the doubt and say, were you aware that you are not allowed to ask me this question? Then add to it in something to the effect of, I'm ready and eager to discuss this job with you. Can we focus on the questions that apply to the position being filled? So, because some people doing the interviewing don't know what is a legal and an illegal question. They're new at
Yes.
this because the HR person got let go a month ago. And so now it's the department manager doing the interview, and they don't always know. So I do appreciate that phrasing it that way just to help them out as well.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that, Rhonda, because that's a really, really well said. That was one of the reasons that I believe my company sent me to classes on how to interview also, because a lot of people don't know the laws. They don't know the rules. They just need your help. Okay. And they're trying to make the best decision on who to hire. I think we'll take one more, Rhonda, and then we can.
And I did put in the link for online careerforcemn.com online, but I will also put in the link for next week's session. You will get a listing after this for all of the local career force locations, so you can find someone in your area to connect with. And I think that's it for now. So I'll add that link.
Excellent. Thank you, Rhonda. So I want to talk to you about after the interview and what do you actually do too. Now, first off, when you go to the interview, I want you in your portfolio to have 3 references. Okay. I've had people who they're like, well, I need 5 references. No, you don't. You just need 3 references. And know this. Now, please don't misquote me. You always want to assume that they're going to check your references. But let me tell you this much. If I interviewed you and you interviewed really well and I needed your help and I decided to hire you and you passed Miss Jackie, I didn't always check your references, okay? Because you sold me at the interview. But you always want to assume they're going to check your references. And what I want you to do is, first off, get permission from your references to use them as your references. There was nothing worse than me calling you your reference and they'd say, what? They said that they could use me as a reference? No, they can't, and they hang up on me. In addition to that, when you're using someone as your reference, I want you to give them a copy of your resume. I want you to give them a copy of your job description, okay, that you're applying for. And I want you to even go as far as highlight the skills off that job description that you have. Okay, I've done that in the past and I had my reference go, wow, Gloria, I didn't even know you knew how to do all these things. So if you barely know what your skills are and you can barely talk to them, you can't expect your reference to know them. Okay, so help them out a little bit, give them some highlights and some points on the type of job you're going after. Then when you are done with the interview, I really want to encourage you to send a thank you note. Okay. Now you can do your thank you note either through email or through mail, or you can give it to the reception as you're walking out the door, however you feel comfortable. Okay. The key is to make sure that you do a thank you note. So one of the things that I would always do is I would go to the dollar store, and this is my own preference now, go to the dollar store and I would buy a card thank you note for 50 cents. And the card was blank on the inside, so it probably would say thank you on the outside. Open it up, and I would put on the left side my email, my phone number. And on the right side, I would say thank you. And again, I would put their names, whether they introduced me by Miss Mitchell or by their first name. I would put their names. Thank you for the opportunity to interview with you. I look forward to hearing from you. Sincerely, Glory Mitchell. Okay. And again, I've got my email and my phone number on the other side, just ready so they can call me and tell me I got the job. Okay. But the thank you card will oftentimes be the thing that pushes them over to hiring you. So say that it's between you and someone else, and the other person, they're like, I don't know which one's going to be better, but they just got a thank you card from you. They're going to say, you know what? Let's go with them. Okay. Just based on the fact that you sent the thank you card and interviewed well. So, Rhonda, I think we have time maybe for 1 or 2 more questions.
Great. I did just look, and the workshop for next week hasn't been activated yet, so keep an eye on that link for that workshop to come up. There's one more comment that says, I always have more references than what is required or suggested.
Yeah, I don't know that I would do that. It can almost be overkill. Okay, so just have 3 really good sound references that you're going to keep up to date all the time. Okay, typically they'll ask you for professional references. When someone would give me 6 references, so for instance, they'd give me 3 professional and 3 personal, I'm not going to call the personal because I know that all of those are probably your mom, your cousin, and your aunt. Okay, that's what I would assume. Okay, not necessarily that that was true, but your professional references, I would call. Now let me talk really quick about this in regards to your professional references. Say that you were working for a job and the boss hated you. Okay. Don't use that boss then as a reference. What you can use instead is a work colleague, someone who can who worked right next to you, or someone who can give you a good reference, knowing that you're going to be a good worker. If I call the supervisor the boss, the only thing they can actually tell me is the day you started, the day you quit, and would they hire you again. If I call your work colleague, they can talk freely with me, and that's my favorite type of reference to call, is someone who can speak freely with me and tell me what a great person you're going to be for my company. Okay. I think we got time for one more, Rhonda.
One more, talking about the difference between personal and professional references. What are the differences, and is it okay to just have professional references? Do you really need personal references? As like you said, they're just going to say she bakes a mean apple pie and she's really nice.
Right, exactly. Please, first off, don't use your mother. I've called your mother, and here's what she says to me. Well, you know, Billy was a good boy. He just moved in with me. He doesn't have a place to live, and if you just give him a job, everything would be much better. Okay, mom can't maintain, so don't use her as a reference. Second off, I recommend you use your professional references and add personal only if they're asking for personal. Okay, when do you give your references? When they ask for them. Okay, it's as simple as that. Sometimes you bring them to the interview. You always want to have them in your portfolio, but if they're not asking you for references, you only give them when they ask for them. Okay. Boy, one of the mistakes I made in the past is I thought, okay, I got to give you all these references. I got to send all the copies of my certificates and my degrees and everything. They don't want all that stuff. Okay. Part of it is they're paying attention to you, and if you're paying attention to detail. So only give them what they're asking for. And having said that, Rhonda, we're right at 11 o'clock. So I wanted to let everybody know that I know we probably didn't get to all your questions. What Rhonda and I will do now is we go over the chat. All of your questions are so important to us. And when we send that follow-up email, which I want you to keep an eye out for it because it'll be coming within the next day or so, we will answer those questions. Okay. So you will get answers to them. And we really hope that you join us on week six. Even if you're not over 50 years old, it's still a lot of great information on job search. So have a wonderful day. And again, reach out to us. If you are going in for that interview, we will help you get the job. So thank you for joining us. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.